Welcome to 4E TV. I'm so glad you chose to join us today. Have we got an incredible program planned for you today? Just to remind you, 4E is a place that you can come to experience peace. We want you to experience peace and not just experience it in a moderate way, but experience it in a full way. And we do this by teaching you how to give attention daily to the 4 areas of your life. That's what 4E is about. We want you to give daily attention to every day to your physical self, your emotional self, your intellectual self, and finally your spiritual self. Because we all want to grow spiritually, but I've used the analogy before, like a wheel. If we neglect giving attention to those 4 areas and one or more areas, we have a weakness. And over time, that weakness will reveal itself before everything else comes crumbling down. Well, today, we're going to talk about complaints and excuses. Have you ever made a complaint? Have you ever made excuses? See, we all do this, and they are repetitive in nature. They are also infectious and contagious in nature. One can lead to the other. We complain, we make excuse. We complain, we make excuse. And it goes back and forth. And complaints, excuses, they paralyze us. They paralyze us like fear paralyzes us. And as we know from the Word of God, that love, which God is love, can't stand in the presence of fear. Perfect love conquers all fear. And see, fear cannot stand in the presence of love. So we understand they oppose each other. So I want you to understand today is going to be a day you're going to experience freedom and no more complaints, no more excuses. We're going to get out of the way. Just to review, we have got so many great positive comments and feedback regarding some recent teachings we've done on insulin resistance and how that God actually talks about the timing and the types of nutrition in His Word. And with that said, just to revisit a little bit and refresh those of you that may have missed it and those of you that caught the program, to kind of refresh where we're in Exodus chapter 16. Now in Exodus chapter 16, I got my Bible here, and you know, my Bible is one that I've got a lot of comments on. It has markings in it, and it has torn pages. I actually got it recovered lately, so I'm pretty proud of this thing. I'm going to try to take better care of it because I used to put pins like this inside my binder and it would mess it up and it tore apart over time. But the thing about a Bible is it's not just a book. It's not just the #1 selling book of all time. It is much, much more. This, what I hold in my hand, friends, is the Word of God. This is more than just written words on a page. This is the Word of the living God. And many times we don't treat it as such. We don't think it holds that magnitude. We think these are just historical records, but it's more than that. You want to know what God says about something, what He thinks about something, and what His will is, you ask Him and learn to listen. We learn to listen. Faith comes from hearing, and hearing from what? Yep, you got it, from the Word of God. So I'm going to turn in God's Word to Exodus chapter 16. And remember, if you will, in Exodus 16, this is the time where the children of Israel are in the desert. And to kind of set up the situation, they'd been out about 2.5, 3 months out of captivity in Egypt. And Moses was leading them towards the promised land. They were in the desert at the moment, and they were complaining. Remember, we talked about today's theme being complaints and excuses. They were complaining that God... They wanted to go back where they came from because they had so much there. And God provided 2 things for them to eat. He provided manna in the morning, and He provided quail in the evening. Now, as you remember, manna, they said it looked like a white coriander seed. After doing some research, I discovered that coriander seed is loaded with significant amounts of calcium, iron, magnesium, and manganese. Very important nutrients for the health of not only our brain but the rest of the body. We could go into a whole different show about the need for magnesium in our lives, but suffice it to say, He gave them the coriander or the manna in the morning to eat. Now, The coriander seed is mainly a carbohydrate. They would make it into cakes, and the instruction was to eat that during the day. And when they got towards evening, God provided quail in the evening. Now, quail is mainly a protein. So understand, he's telling them to eat carbohydrates during the day, and once the twilight hit, he's telling them to eat the protein. Now, we look at our nutritional practices or habits or customs these days, and we see that that is totally off. That has switched around. So we see God's design was not just providing arbitrarily food for them to eat at their whim. He was actually providing specific types of nutrition within this system, so with instructions on not just what to eat, but when to eat. So we need to pay close attention to God's Word. Now, having said that, I want to back up to Exodus 16, verse 1 through 3. And I want to read this to you because it talks about this idea of complaints. All right? Beginning in verse 1 of Exodus chapter 16. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If we had only died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into the desert to starve this entire assembly to death." They began to complain. As they complained, God heard their complaints. How many times do we complain and we say, "God, meet my complaint"? We got to stop complaining, friends. God's going to meet our needs. We got to trust Him with that. They complained. God met their need through the coriander seed or the manna and then the quail in the evening. He also gave them instructions. Now, after they complained, He met their needs, you would have thought that the instructions would have been followed to a T. But as we see, as we move down to verse 20 of Exodus 16, remember He said that I want to give you enough every single day. Let's use our typical week example. Monday through Saturday, every single day, you're going to have enough. But on the last day, I want you to gather just enough for every day. Don't gather too much, because if you do, it's not going to be good. But listen to what the people did in verse 20. Some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it until morning, but it was full of maggots. They're nasty, you know. They begin to smell. The cool thing about this is, and the sad thing is, even after they complained, God supplied the need, they began to be disobedient and didn't listen to God's instructions. The disobedience continued. We move down to verse 27 and verse 28 of the same chapter. Not only did they, says some of them gather too much every day, but look at what happened when we got to the sixth day. God said, just on the sixth day, I don't want you to gather enough for that one day. I want you to gather enough for 2 days, because I'm going to give you a day of rest. Watch what they did. Verse 27. Nevertheless, some of the people went out on the seventh day to gather it, but they found none. Amazing. Then the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commands and my instructions? See, the question is posed to all of us today. How long are we going to go ignoring God's commands and His instructions? He tells us what we need to do, exactly what we need to do all day long. He tells us what we need to eat, but we continue to be disobedient to that. And the amazing thing is, we complain all the time. How many times have we gone to the doctor just to get a pill? Or how many times have we said, I just can't do that because my life is so stressful? See, we complain, we make excuses. I'm just going to be sick. My whole family has diabetes, so I'm going to get diabetes one day. I mean, seriously, how long are we going to make complaints and make excuses and not accept responsibility? One of the greatest concerns that I have today in this world is this epidemic of this condition called type 2 diabetes. It is getting younger and younger. The more we watch this in society, teenagers are getting pre-diabetic and type 2 diabetic symptoms. I mean, that is crazy. It's insanity, and we continue to complain and make excuses and want somebody else to fix it. When, ladies and gentlemen, we're the ones that are being disobedient, just like we did a couple thousand years ago. See, not much has changed. We as people have the desire that we're born with to be disobedient. God gives us everything we need. He gives us the instructions, and yet we still complain and we still make excuses when things go wrong after we didn't follow His instructions. You see, many lives today are beginning to, and I'll use this analogy because God, we have not paid attention, so things are getting sick, they're getting infected. That's where the maggots come in. Things get rotten. Many times we just eat too much and we get sick. The body becomes infected, becomes inflamed. And you know, today we've got to get a hold of this. And that's a great segue to introduce the guest today. And you know, she's no stranger to all of us. We have Dr. Neil back with us. Welcome back again. Thanks for joining us again. I really appreciate it.
Mark, it's great to be back.
Well, you always do such a great job, and I know people know your story, and it's a really fascinating story, but you don't have just the typical medical practice. You actually pray over people sometimes. So you're a Christian.
Absolutely.
So just real quick to kind of refresh everybody, tell everyone again how you came to know the Lord.
Well, I kind of came to know the Lord when I was a small 5-year-old child. I just said yes to God. I knew that my life was dedicated to service. I wasn't quite sure what that meant or how that was going to take shape or form, but as I went through all the challenges, trials, and tribulations, the different medical education processes, relationships, and things that came across my life, I finally ended up in a medical career and now have a medical clinic which is designed to help people find their way home to their own wellness, getting back to the root cause of what's causing disease and helping them find ways to be well.
I like how you said find their way home. You know, when we find our way home, there's safety, there's sanctuary, there's peace, and there's rest. But we've got off, and you heard me talking about, I guess I should say I was ranting about the epidemic of type 2 diabetes. And one of the things that I hear with that is these two words put together, insulin resistance. Can you explain kind of what that is?
Insulin resistance, just kind of getting back to what you were talking about with the word, is that, you know, God gave us the timing of food. And not only did He give us the timing of food, He doesn't want us to be gluttonous and overtake what He's given us to eat. Insulin resistance is a syndrome that we actually cause ourselves by being gluttonous and taking in too many carbohydrates at the wrong times, too much all the time. It's the typical standard American diet. We do refined carbohydrates, high glycemic index carbohydrates, cakes, cookies, candies. All these things, they stress the pancreas. The pancreas is an endocrine organ that is designed to handle the incoming blood sugar. But when that blood sugar becomes out of control, the pancreas all of a sudden no longer has a damper on itself. So it's continually producing high levels of insulin, and then the body becomes resistant to its own voice. So the metabolic cells now can no longer see fuel to take it into the cells and make energy from it. So it becomes resistant.
So you mentioned something there, a couple things. You said that we're eating too much of the wrong things at the wrong time. And you mentioned a key thing that I've heard a lot today, something about that mentioned the word high glycemic. Can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Glycemic, what glycemic means is that insulin has a specific response to different types of carbohydrates. So if I give you a sweet potato, for example.
You're making me hungry. Yes.
Your body will produce a very low level of insulin in response to that low glycemic index carbohydrate. Now, if I was to give you a Snicker bar or a cup of coffee full of sugar, your pancreas is going to produce a very large amount of insulin.
This has no sugar, by the way, just saying.
Strong work.
Yes.
So if you produce a very large amount of insulin in response to that high glycemic index carbohydrate, eventually your system will become resistant to the voice of insulin.
So it would be important for one to actually know what the glycemic index is and how foods fit in there.
Yes, and that takes somewhat of an education, but once you kind of have patterns and understanding about the basics, then it becomes simple.
Now, I hear something today, a type 2 diabetes, and then I hear a type 1 diabetes. Can you kind of explain the difference? What's most common? I seem to understand that the type 2 is most common, but I really don't understand why.
Well, type 2 diabetes, believe it or not, started many years prior with insulin resistance. The body becomes insulin resistant first. So you start putting on that little bit of weight, your blood sugars start to go up, your lab values start to become abnormal, and before you know it, you become resistant to the voice of insulin. Your body is still making insulin, but it cannot hear the voice of it. so it's unable to use its own energy source, glucose, sugar, as fuel. In a type 1 diabetic's pancreas is completely tired. It's worn out. It can no longer make insulin. So that individual is dependent upon insulin replacement in order to manage blood sugar.
Which one's more common?
Type 2 diabetes is actually epidemic in our society today. You pretty much can guarantee that anybody that's carrying around a few extra pounds in their midsection has some problem with insulin resistance and metabolism.
Wow. So what you're saying is, and I read the statistics, I mean, some of them have said that as many or as much as 40, even closer to 50% of our society these days is not just overweight, but approaching this condition we'd call obesity. So even backing that down to being overweight, you're saying that even the overweight majority, a lot of them have these insulin resistance symptoms. Is that right?
Yes. Well, the first change is that change in body composition. You put on that freshman 40 in your freshman year of college. That is too many carbohydrates, too much all the time and at the wrong time.
So as we do this inventory, and I hope people out there are really beginning to do an inventory with what's being said today. So as we do this inventory of what's happening, so it's the weight gain. What else happens physically to our bodies as this condition is permeating itself?
For example, individuals become tired, lethargic, they'll put on that weight, their blood parameters start to change, they start to have that increase in blood pressure, they start to have triglyceride problems, the doctor may tell them that their good cholesterol is dropping low, their fasting blood sugars are starting to become elevated.
So they're going to come to you, and since we were talking about complaints, the complaint would be, example, I'm coming to you and I would say, doctor, I put on a few pounds, I'm lethargic, I don't feel good at all, and that would be a common complaint you hear.
Yes, and another common complaint is mental fog, or I just don't think clearly, I don't have the clear-headed thinking, I can't multitask like I once was able to.
Now, so they come to you with the complaints, and you would say to them, what, change your nutrition, change your lifestyle, I guess, I'm assuming?
Lifestyle is 85% of the large ball of wax. Long-term outcome, you got to go back to your lifestyle.
What about medication? I mean, I've asked questions of people, and of course, being a physical training guy, a lot of times during the conversation, they'll talk about the medications they're taking, and many times I hear about medications taken in regard to this condition called insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. I seem to recall maybe one of the medications was metformin. I heard that name. So is medication appropriate at times?
Medication is absolutely appropriate. That's one of the reasons I went to medical school, is because I couldn't handle all things being an ND with nutrition alone. I had to reach for other things when it's urgent and necessary. You cannot treat type 1 diabetes without insulin. That's a medication. But when it comes to insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, we know that exercise is more powerful than the drug insulin in sensitizing the system to its own fuel. So if we can just get people moving, we're going to sensitize them to their own fuel. And we may have to use medication for the short term, but we may be able to get by with using less medication. Then if we can change that lifestyle around and get them eating right and educating them about low glycemic index carbohydrates, guess what? We're going to see that blood sugar reduction happen over a good 12-week period of time on a gradual decline.
Now, you just said something that is fascinating to me, because as I talk to people, they begin to take medication, in this case, for this condition. And I hear coming from them this belief that this is what they have to do for the rest of their lives. But you're saying something different. You're saying that that's not necessarily the case, that it might be just for a short-term period of time until they change their lifestyle.
That's correct. I mean, I've had patients who have completely turned type 2 diabetes around and insulin resistance around with diet and exercise alone. So they get committed to 12 weeks of healthy lifestyle, and they make that their lifestyle for the rest of their life. They don't have to be dependent on medication. They're always going to be having to watch that blood sugar, and they're always going to know that they have a condition that they are predisposed to. Just because your levels are normal doesn't mean that you can go out and binge on chocolate cake, cookie, Snicker bars again. You've got to keep that lifestyle for life.
So is type 2 diabetes preventable?
Yes.
Wow. Now, see, a lot of people, and I know you've heard this before, they come to you and you would tell them all this stuff. We're talking about complaints. That's the complaint. But what excuses do you hear when you give them all the information in regard to preventing or turning the clock back on that disease?
The excuses range anywhere from, I forgot to set my alarm clock, to I got to take the kids to school, to, oh, I just forgot about exercise, or oh, my neck hurts, or my back hurts, or, you know, if we don't exercise, we're not going to be able to move our backs because we won't have the muscles to do so.
So they actually tell you that, and what is a typical response that you would give them in regard to those excuses?
I'd get them right back on the train. I'll encourage them, find reasons for getting them back on the train and getting them away from what's holding them back.
Now you understand why I absolutely love the practice that Dr. Neil has, because it's not about just giving someone a medicine with the intent to put a Band-Aid on something that's really wrong. It's getting people well. It's taking them through that place to find their way home, home being where it's peaceful, it's harmonious, it's healthy, it's safe. That's where we want us to be. We got to quit making excuses. And I'm amazed at people that say they don't have time. Do you hear that a lot? I don't have time.
That seems to be a lot of it. When it kind of is summed up or boiled up, a lot of times people don't have the education that they need. So perhaps to come in and get coaching with a lifestyle educator so that they can work through some of the things that are holding them back or setting them back, so we can nail down where they're having difficulties and problems that they keep spinning around something that's not healthy for them.
Yeah, that's what I find cool about your particular practice is you not only see them as the CEO, chief physician, but you have a program available where they can receive continual reinforcement, encouragement, accountability, and there's a process in place over time to walk them down this path one step at a time to change their life. Because it's not easy to change your life once you've been doing something with this body of knowledge you've had for so long. It's not easy to just change and flip it around, right?
That's right. You got to go home and completely clean out those cupboards. You've got to be completely committed. And oftentimes, working with a lifestyle coach, we take it one step at a time. We don't always go 360 and turn it around. We've got to take steps in the manner that someone can actually do it and be successful.
I've heard it said before that it's kind of like once we get this ship off course, that we want to kind of turn it 1 or 2 degrees at a time. And if you try to do a big U-turn, you could actually capsize the boat.
Yeah, different systems handle things differently.
Right.
And so some people can take 10 steps at a time, some people can take 1.
Yeah, and I know what you're thinking out there right now. Does Mark ever have a cookie? Does Mark ever have cake? Does Mark ever have ice cream? You know what? The answer is, well, actually I haven't had a cookie in a while. I can't think on that one. Have I had a piece of cake? Yes. Do I like ice cream? Yes. I just don't binge on it all the time. I mean, I don't crave it. And actually, I think Dr. Neil would echo what I'm getting ready to say is, when you begin to put the right things the way God intended it into your bodies at the right times, your body will respond appropriately, and your actual desires, cravings, and tastes will actually change. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. If you get off the vicious cookie cycle, get off the vicious cookie train, you will actually have less cravings, reach into that cookie cabinet less, and then that vicious cookie cycle breaks itself.
I am encouraged with what you shared today. I'm really hoping that people will take advantage of the knowledge that you've shared with them today, because this epidemic of type 2 diabetes can be turned around. And right now, as you would probably agree with me, we have got an epidemic on our hands, and many times we're not addressing it. We're making excuses.
That's right, and it's our goal to educate, get that lifestyle turned around, because we know we can do it without medication, but it requires those that are willing to get on that train and do it with us.
And you're saying that from a practicing physician. You're saying that from a medical standpoint, that we can do this without medication.
Absolutely. I've seen it time and time and time again, but there are instances where medication is absolutely necessary.
I love how you put the pieces together. It's great. You know, I tell you what, friends, it's really encouraging to me, and it should be encouraging to you, that there's a better way. You know, too many times we sit back and we say, well, it's just going to be like this. But my dad had diabetes, my mom had diabetes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a matter of if, it's when. Now, there is, as you heard Dr. Neil mention, somewhat of a genetic predisposition to have the likelihood or the propensity or the high probability that if you don't do certain things, your chances are greater that you'll acquire that condition. However, it doesn't have to be that way. Now, genetically speaking, we have those predisposition moments, but that does not mean that we are going to have that disease or condition forever, correct?
Well, that's correct. If you live long enough, eventually you're going to wear your pancreas out and you're going to develop a condition. But if we stay on the train and take good care of the machine and the machinery that we have, we are designed to live, what does the Bible say? 120 years.
Check that out. Look it up. It's in the book of Genesis when God shortened the life of man because he had enough. You know, we tend to think, well, he shortened their life because he was mad. We still get 120 years. Let's stop taking poor care of this wonderful creation that God gave us. He made our bodies and these things we call, these creatures we call human beings, in his own image. Do you think he made you to walk around sick, beat down, broken, all feeling depressed and type 2 diabetic? You think God did that? You heard today knowledge. Now, once you hear knowledge, you become responsible for it. When you're responsible for knowledge and you don't do it, well, there's a word for that, and it's not called wisdom. I'm just going to tell you, because I love you, it's called stupidity. I'm not calling anybody stupid, but for me and all of us, if we have the correct knowledge and don't do it, well, we know that is basically stupid. So we've got to stop being like that. Now, here at 4E, you know, I want you to continue to keep us in your prayers because we need your prayer. If you'll visit the website, you'll find a link to Dr. Neil's practice and clinic. It's on there. Look under partner links, and you'll find there's some great things. And you'll even learn about the glycemic index. She's got some links and some helpful blogs. I want you to check her out, connect with them, and that will be a big blessing in your life. You'll get answers to these epidemic-type problems in life that attack our physical body, and they are correctable with lifestyle change. But get on the 4E website and join us. Join us in prayer by subscribing to the 4E Foundation newsletter. We operate this ability to run television and to take mission trips surely on donations and your support and your prayer. I want your prayer first and foremost, but if God lays it in your heart to donate towards this ministry, we are tax deductible as the law allows. I want you to be encouraged today, friends. It's been a great day. It's a great day to be alive. Take good care of yourself. Walk in health, walk in peace, walk in ease, and be blessed, friends. And be encouraged because God's got a plan for your life.